Hey guys, in this video I wanted to talk about test scores and tests in general and why I want to tell you, and I hope you'll listen to me, that you are more than a test score. And especially right now, it's finals time, and probably a lot of kids at UC Berkeley are worried about finals. And then you've got kids after they graduate worrying about the MCAT or the LSAT or the GRE or the FE exam if you're an engineer. And so you've got all these tests. And I was reading through a GRE study book for fun, and one thing that I came across that really resonated with me is your GRE score reflects how well you took the GRE. It does not reflect how well you will be a graduate student. And there was a podcast I was listening to also by Malcolm Gladwell on revisionist history that was discussing these tests that we make ourselves take in order to justify why we're a qualified applicant to some program or a job. And one of the things that came up is that when you're sitting down to take the LSAT, for instance, you have 30 to 35 minutes to read a bunch of passages very quickly and to answer the multiple choice questions to see if you understood the argument and what would refute this argument or whatever. And it's basically an exercise in how well can you answer questions correctly and quickly. And the and quickly part is the issue that we take offense to, because as a lawyer, when you're practicing law, and Malcolm Gladwell gave this very good example of a clerk who was working for Justice Scalia in the Supreme Court. Justice Scalia said his best clerk out of all the clerks he had wasn't someone who went to Harvard, it wasn't someone who went to Yale, it was someone who went to Ohio State. And relative to Harvard and Yale, you don't need to have as high of an LSAT score to go to Ohio State. And so it opened up this contradiction that the best lawyers are the ones who have gone to the best schools. And the issue with that is that the reason that the applicant wasn't able to go to Harvard or Yale or one of the top 12 law schools was that they didn't have the LSAT score to get in. And the LSAT score, law school admissions test, measures how well you took the law school admissions test, which is a measure of how well can you answer questions very quickly and correctly. And when you are a clerk or when you are working in the field in whatever profession you are doing, it doesn't have to be law, it can be medicine, it can be engineering, it can be any profession. Quite often it's the case that you don't need to necessarily work quickly. You need to be able to understand a complex argument or a complex system and be able to fundamentally analyze and critique and improve these arguments, or in the case of lawyers, like refute them. And Malcolm Gladwell was interviewing this one person who was a very prestigious lawyer, and she was describing what her day-to-day work is like. And she was saying how important it is that when you are reading through cases and code, you need to read extremely slowly and thoughtfully and take notes with a pencil, because these arguments are so intricate and complex. And the issue is that the LSAT that you take is going to be describing how well you can read a little, somewhat simple argument in a very short amount of time. And it's essentially favoring people who are referred to as hares, as jackrabbits, as very quick animals. They're very quick to answer questions correctly. The issue is that you are now discriminating against people who are tortoises, people who take their time to get to a right answer. And so doing really well on the LSAT is measuring how well you can take the LSAT and how good of a hare you are. How quickly can you read through an essay and give the right answer? And it's not always the kind of quality that you want in the profession afterwards. When you're reading a Supreme Court case and you're looking through the legal code, You need to be able to read very slowly to appreciate all that is going into this and what is the law clearly state and what is the plaintiff's argument and the defendant's argument. And it is extraordinarily complex and it takes time. And the tortoises who have been discriminated against early on in this whole process by not letting them get the high score that they could, so they could get into this prestigious law firm or law school, they are left in the dirt. And one of the things that Malcolm Gladwell talked about was how if you were to look at the statistics behind who are the best lawyers, the people who win cases, at the end of the day, that's what you really care about. You don't care about where they went to school. Intuitively, at the surface, people will say that the guys who went to Harvard, the guys who went to the top 12 or 14 law schools, they're going to be the ones who win all the cases, right? But the statistics shows that there is no correlation between the quality of the lawyer, and the quality of the lawyer is the kind of person who is able to win these cases, and the level of the school that they went to. So us humans have essentially created a little universe in which our magazines have created rankings for our schools, and we are privileging and favoring people who can get high scores on these tests. And because they have the high scores on the tests, they're able to get into the high ranked schools. But in the actual profession, that quality that is measured, that is such a important value in the admissions process to the profession, isn't really that relevant to the profession itself. And so this is a huge, contradiction in how we look at the world and how we look at life. And so what is the solution here? Because I don't like it when people just tell me about problems and, how wrong people are. And Malcolm Gladwell had a very good solution, which is instead of us talking about schools and test scores, make it a don't ask, don't tell policy. And in this, I think of stuff like when they're auditioning musicians to join a concert, do you really need to see the musician in order to judge how good of a musician they are? And the answer is no. You need to only listen and look and hear, to not look, to hear the quality of their work. And the quality of the work of a lawyer is whether or not they're able to win cases and how many cases have they won, not visually necessarily, like what law school did they go to, what LSAT score did they have. I don't necessarily care about that. And this is, again, symbolic or an analogy of Michael Lewis's book, where he talks about Moneyball and how you had a bunch of statisticians on the Oakland A's who were able to just look at the stats behind players and know who was undervalued, and they were able to very cost effectively create a team that was better than what all the traditional scouts thought were the best players. And you're seeing the same thing in law, you're seeing the same thing in medicine, you're seeing the same thing in every profession, which is how well you do on these tests has no correlation, which has been statistically proven, to how well you actually do on the job. How well you do on the test has 100% correlation to how well you can take the test, but that's it. And I think it's good to remind yourself of these things when you're walking in to take these exams, or you've got a final coming up and you're worried about getting a 3.4 instead of a 3.5. Just remind yourself that these are just numbers, and at the end of the day, the quality of your work is not dictated by these numbers, because you are more than a test score. And I think this is probably a good point for me to end the video. I hope this is somewhat inspiring to people out there. And just remember that I think the moral of this story is that at the end of the day, the qualities and the talents that you bring to whatever profession you do in the world will come through at the end, even if your test score or your grade point average doesn't necessarily reflect that. People will see, and you will still be the same person you are after you take that test as you were before. And, no matter what letters are after your name, you are still the same person, and the quality of work will show the quality of your work and the quality of who you are and what you do. And so, thank you guys for watching, and I hope everyone's doing well, and we'll see you next time.